So this video is going to introduce the use of the BeagleBone controller and Node-RED for an internet access lab. So with Node-RED, each node is a block that performs a given task. These nodes typically have configuration parameters that'll need to be accessed by double-clicking on the node and then adjusting them and then applying it. Input and inject nodes only have one output connection because they're inputting the data from maybe pulling it in from the network or just from an instruction or display, and then they're outputting it into the next node. So the output is to the nodes within the program. And then the output nodes only have one input, so they're getting input from other nodes, and then they're going to output that to either a debug statement or GPIO pins or to the network or a display. So the program is basically called a flow. So what you do is you're going to pull in nodes, and then you're going to connect the nodes together. So you have an input node, brings data in and passes it through a line, and it flows into the next node. So that's kind of where the term flow comes from. These lines carry a payload of information, and that payload can be like categorized and can contain many different bits of information, as we'll see. So here's a simple example flow that you should maybe have on your BeagleBone in the classroom. And so we have several different nodes here. So each one of these blocks is called a node. And then when they're connected together, then that's where the data is flowing from one node to the next. So let's take a look. The first one we have up here is just a comment node. So this node really doesn't actually do anything, so it doesn't have any connections. It's just a place where you can put text or descriptions of what is happening in the flow or what the purpose of the flow. You notice there's some blue dots on a couple of these. The blue dot indicates that the node has been changed, and so therefore the latest changes will not take effect until you actually click on the deploy, which will be in the top right side. Note that if the flow has already been running, and it will continue to run based on the old settings until you deploy these changes. This is the input node that we talked about. The input node has an output of the node, and then the data is coming in. Now this particular one's called an inject, and so it just you select something that you're going to inject, and then you click on this button with the mouse to actually inject it, and it'll force it out the line to the next node. This node here is a processing node, and so it has inputs and it can have one or more outputs. And so you can see this one has 3 outputs, although we're only connected to one of the outputs. These different types, there's lots and lots of different types of processing nodes to do whatever you want. This particular one was a test of the network, so it's actually just running a system command to check for your Ethernet interface and seeing what the IP address is. We're connected to just one of the outputs in this case. You don't have to necessarily use all the inputs or the outputs that are available on here. So we're just using the one here. And we're connecting this one to an output. Now this one actually happens to be the debug. And so the debug, by default, the debug will put it into a little place on the right hand side, and you can read all the debug messages. But if you double click on it, you can also get, there's a little checkbox down there for node access, and that's what this little rectangle here is. And so once you inject something, the output of this process box will be displayed here without having to go to the debug messages. Down here I have another node. This one's labeled GPIO, so this is for like the BeagleBone or the Raspberry Pi, and you can actually access the general purpose input output pins. And since this one is an output, that by choosing this you would automatically be selecting the output mode of the pin you're going to connect to. But notice here there's a little red triangle. This triangle indicates that this node needs some configuration done to it, and that has not been done yet. So that's kind of like an error. There's an issue with this node, so it's not going to operate. Now you can still deploy, but this particular node would not function properly because it hasn't been completely configured. So that's what that triangle indicates. Alright, so for this lab, what we're going to do is we're going to make use of data that's already available. And so, you know, airports around the world, right, they transmit information about the current weather at that airport so that, you know, for in general, planes can receive that data, but that data is available for everybody. And so, and there's, you know, tons of other information that is out there on the internet that could be used for any sort of internet things. An example of using this in a business might be for checking weather at different places for transportation purposes or things like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to the NOAA site for aviation, and we're going to pull out what's called the METAR. It's an acronym. It stands for Meteorological Aerodrome Report. And so it'll tell us various bits of information about the airport. But to do that, we have to use the code to select the airport. So the code used for the NOAA data is ICAO, just the International Civil Aviation Org codes. So you have to locate those. And for the United States airports, those start with a K. So here's a little part of the wiki page here showing you the map of the codes. So for like the Canton-Akron Airport, it's actually K and then CAK. And so you can see here the United States, all of the United States codes were going to start with K. You know, ones in Canada start with a C, and so on. So to get the METAR data, you can go to weather.gov. And so here's a link of some data here. This here gives you the timestamp. It tells you the type of data, the station ID, the timestamp. Here's the wind direction and the speed, the weather, the clouds. So all kinds of information is available on here. So if you look at this, here's a slide that I found. There's a link for the slide on the internet, or a graphic that kind of shows you the information that is available. Now, the link I was using didn't quite give all of this information in this order, but most of it's here, and it's easy to tell. So you have like the station ID, and then there's a timestamp, and then there's the winds, and the visibility, and then like the weather here. So you see like -RA indicates that it's light rain. If it had a +RA, it would be heavy rain. And then the temperature, of course, is given in Celsius. So this 23 here is 23 degrees Celsius. Not 100% sure why it says 22.2 down here. I'm not sure, but it's basically 73 Fahrenheit. Here's a little compass icon I have. So when you look at the winds, you can see that it has 130, 10 knots. So the 130 is the compass direction. So if you look here, right, true north is 0 degrees, east is 90 degrees, and so this is reading 130. So that's down here in the southeasterly direction. So that's how to read the winds on there. And then you have, of course, the speed is given in knots. All right, so to connect to your Node RED, you have to just open up any browser, and then up in the address bar, you want to type in your address. So the address up here for the BeagleBone would be 192.168.7.2, and then the port number, you have to go to the port, and the port is :1880. So you need to make sure that the BeagleBone is plugged in and turned on, and then it will be up there. So now here's like the network test node that I had, and so I just drug it around here so you can see they're all blue. In this case, I didn't actually make any changes other than simply the location, so the program itself was not modified. So if I inject a timestamp, it executes here and then it pulls up an IP address. And so this is the IP address of the BeagleBone. Now notice I went to 172 up here in the address bar, but that is just the 7.2 IP address is for the USB connection between the PC and the BeagleBone. But to get to the internet, you actually need a network plugged into the BeagleBone, and you need to have a valid IP address. So that was kind of the purpose of this network test flow. Now, if we wanted to go to the METAR data, before we actually get into the flow, we got to have an idea of how to get the data from the internet. So here is the website. It's aviationweather.gov, and then /data/METAR/ and then your airport. So it's $IDS equals KCAK for Akron Canton. And when you do that, that gives you this page here, which gives you a lot of different things that you can choose and select. But what we want is we just want the METAR data, which is this string down here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the raw data, and when I do that, this URL up here, the address, is going to change. And this is the URL that we want. So you can see here, here's our raw data, and this is all that we want for our flow. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to copy this URL. So I'm going to do a Control-C over here, and then I'm going to come over here to my Node RED, and I'm just going to create a brand new flow. So I'm just going to create this from scratch here, and I want a brand new flow, and I'm going to do a HTTP request. So I'm going to do a search up here to just search through all the nodes and grab the one that says HTTP request, and then I'll clear my filter so the other ones come back. So in here, I'm just going to come over here, and for the URL, I'm just going to paste in the URL that I had. So now notice here again, it's HTTPS aviationweather.gov and then the IDS KCAK, which is the Akron Canton Airport, so that will have to change as your airport changes. But then we just have these extra couple of pieces on here. And so what we're going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and click on done. And I just want to test this and make sure that this retrieves the data for starters. So I'm going to grab an eject node, and by default the inject node will inject what's called a timestamp, which is the time in seconds. And then I'm going to grab a debug, and I just want to see whether this thing's actually going to pull the data. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to double click on this debug, and I'm going to click on this node status, and that'll give us this little block down here once I hit deploy. So and then when I do the inject, we'll see that go there. So I'm going to click on deploy, and I'm going to confirm this. And that message was about, I've got so many flows on this BeagleBone, and apparently I've got some issues with them. So you may or may not see that on there, but there was no problem with my current flow. So now see down here on this debug, there's this little square there, but there's no information because we haven't actually injected anything. So now I'm going to, I don't have to do this, but just to show you, here's the little debug, the little ladybug sort of thing, or beetle icon here. Click on that, and then where it says all nodes, you want to make sure you say the current node, because if you have a bunch of nodes, you might be getting messages from those other flows. So go to current flow, and if you need to, click on delete to clean it out. Now this one was, I haven't injected anything in here yet, so there was nothing there, but if there is, you can click on the little trash can to clean it. So now I'm going to click on this timestamp. I'm going to inject the timestamp. Now this HTTP request doesn't really care about the timestamp, but what it also does is just the injection tells this to go ahead and execute the request just by having the timestamp come in. I could feed anything in. It doesn't really matter. At this point, what I'm sending. We'll change that in a little bit. But so if I come in here and I click on that, you saw it said requesting, but now you can see the debug message, and you can't see it all here, but see, you can see now over here in the debug screen, right, we can now see the whole thing. So the whole message here, we have the METAR, we have the station ID, Canton Akron, we have the time, Zulu time. We have the wind, right, is coming out of the direction is 220. Okay, so if we went back and looked at our little map, right, so 220, so the wind's kind of coming southwest there, down here at 220. And the speed is about 7 knots. So notice it gives you a 0 there, so it's 7 knots. And then the temperature is M09, so that is -9 degrees Celsius. Okay, so it's a little bit chilly right now, -9 degrees Celsius. All right, so but anyhow, so now we've seen that this works, but again, if I double click on this, we saw in here that the airport was hard coded, so this is only going to pick from the Akron Canton Airport. So if I delete that and replace it with the payload. So the nodes, as I mentioned before, nodes have a payload, so I'm going to put in payload here, but you have to put a few curly braces in here. And depending on where you're at, sometimes you need one set of curly braces, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. So in this case here, I actually need 3 sets of curly braces. It's a little confusing about why you need that, but it's what happens is they get stripped out. And so you have to put like an extra set in so that it knows it. But basically what we're doing is we're declaring that this is the variable coming in through the input, and we want the entire payload. So now over here at timestamp, I'm going to double click on my inject node. Instead of sending a timestamp, I'm going to send a string, and the string is going to be the Canton-Akron Airport. Okay. And so now when I inject, this does care about that there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead to and make a second copy of this. And then the second copy, I'm just going to go ahead and change this to JFK. So, again, it's got to be a K for the United States, and then JFK is the JFK Airport in New York. And so now I'm going to connect this one in here also. So now these are injects. They only work when you click on them. And so if I click on this one, it'll ask for Canton's data, and if I click on the JFK one, it'll ask for the JFK one. Again, I can delete my debug over here, and then I'm going to deploy this. And now if I click on the Canton one, you can see that I'm getting the Canton data. But if I click on the JFK, now I'm getting the JFK data. So you can see that the temperature is actually exactly freezing there. So we're a little bit colder than New York at the moment. Okay. And you can see that they have a little bit of snow. See the dash SN there indicates that there's a little bit of snow coming down in New York right now. Okay, so now I'm going to add a function node. So I could do a filter here and type in FU, and I can get a function node. But I've actually already got one made up so that you don't have to watch all this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in from another flow